What if I told you that the most popular, the hottest investment over the last 2 years is also definitively the worst investment with a nearly 99% failure rate long term? Buckle up, folks. Something's got to give, or your football cards are going to bankrupt you. These stats are going to blow your mind. Let's data dive. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Data Dive powered by Market Movers. My name is Tyler Nethercott, better known as Teapot. And Houston, we have a problem. I am here to save the football card hobby today. There's a segment of the sports card market that has been on a rocket ship to the moon in terms of popularity over the last 2 years, but I'm concerned that that rocket is about to blow up. And that segment is football cards, and more specifically and essentially just quarterbacks. I've got some alarming statistics for you, some statistics which leave me truly concerned about the long-term viability of the football card community and market. And as always, this video is brought to you by Market Movers. Visit marketmoversapp.com and use promo code DIVE when you check out. You'll get 14 days completely free to try it out and then 20% off for life as long as you're subscribed. Now let's get into the data. All right, so allow me to set the table a bit more here. And I'm not trying to be an alarmist, but like I said, the excessive focus on quarterbacks by the football card market is confounding and highly problematic. And the big problem is that these sealed products today, for example, they're selling for hundreds, if not thousands of dollars for one box. And it's almost completely quarterback or bust when you're looking for hits. You rip a box like Prism Football, for example, for $1,000, and you're chasing like 3, maybe 5 of the 100 rookies on the checklist. And the problem is that there's a high probability that within 1 to 3 years, even those 3 to 5 players won't be holding much value. And I have talked about how most cards in general go down in value over time. That's just the harsh reality of sports cards. But football seems to be the worst value proposition of any sport. Take, for example, my favorite quarterback right now, Patrick Mahomes, who has literally done what no quarterback in history has ever done. He's the best quarterback to this point in his career in history, and his card values are down collectively 1.3% over the last year. He just won his 3rd Super Bowl. There's apparently nothing any player can do to live up to the hype and retain value for any sustainable amount of time within the football card hobby. And every sport in general has issues. They have risks. They have PEDs, character issues, criminal activity, but football has an added very high injury risk, has short-lived careers for many positions, and then on top of it, people put a lot of stock in championships in football, and it seems to be really hard to win a Super Bowl. Football tends to be highly dynastic with very few quarterbacks actually winning Super Bowls. You can see that obviously through the Tom Brady era, Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, a handful of other teams, Steelers teams making it to the Super Bowls, and that's pretty much it. So what I want to do is I want to start by getting into some specific data because my opinions don't matter, but the numbers do. And let's start out with some numbers that aren't card related. These are the top 10 NFL jersey sales from 2023. So a nice indicator of popularity of players. And number one is not Patrick Mahomes. In fact, it is not a quarterback at all. It is Micah Parsons from the Dallas Cowboys. Now we know the Cowboys, very popular team, quote unquote, America's team. They're not my team. But he's one of the most exciting players on that team. Some people a little mixed emotions about Dak. Not surprising to see Parsons on that list. Second is Mahomes. Third was Jalen Hurts. Then you got TJ Watt. You've got Dak on there. Christian McCaffrey, Tyreek Hill, Justin Jefferson. It's a mix is the point. You've got, 4 or 5 quarterbacks, and then you've got other positional players and defensive players. I think that's really important. When we look at how card prices trend, in basketball and in baseball, many times it does correspond to the popularity of those overall players. In football, it seems to only focus on the most important or most notable quarterbacks. You can see the same thing when you go over to the NFL top 100 players of the year. Now, this article, I wouldn't really pay attention to these rankings. This was going into the 2023 season, which is kind of funny after the fact because these numbers do change significantly over time. But you have Patrick Mahomes, unsurprisingly, at number 1. They had Justin Jefferson at number 2, Jalen Hurts at number 3, Nick Bosa, Travis Kelce. Then you see Burrow, Tyreek Hill, Josh Allen, Micah Parsons, Chris Jones. That's just the top 10. And if you were to keep clicking through from 11 to 20, 21 to 30, what you'd see is wide receivers, running backs, defensive ends, cornerbacks, things like that, All of these players are really important to their team's success, and we see that in the NFL draft play out. It's not just like it's the top quarterbacks always taken. Yes, they get a lot of priority. Yes, more often than not, you have a quarterback taken first overall. It's definitely the most important position in football, but it's not the only position. And I've done videos in the past about how every single player on the team contributes to the success. So what I did, I took the last 30 years worth of draft picks, quarterback draft picks from the NFL, going back to 1994, and I did the work to paste all of them into a spreadsheet. And I went through and I categorized them into the status, being a bust, kind of, a star, a little bit Pro Bowler type caliber, star plus, and superstar. And then I also looked at whether or not they have any long-term value. And for most of the newer players, like you see with Bryce Young, I said unlikely. This is my opinion. He did not look good last year. Carolina looks terrible. I'm seeing a more likely pathway of like a Zach Wilson scenario than I am some kind of a bounce back in year 2 or year 3 for Bryce Young. Maybe I'll be wrong. But then with CJ Stroud, he obviously had a fantastic rookie year. Fantastic. It's still too early, in spite of that, to say whether or not he's going to have any value long term as well. Anthony Richardson was hurt. He looked good. Will Levis, and I kind of just went down. The point here isn't to kind of get into a debate about how I categorize these as much. Certainly anybody could come in, and want to look at this and maybe argue some of these points. But I went through and I looked at the status. I put in, emojis in some cases. Many players after round 3, what I did was I didn't categorize any of those players as busts, because to me, an NFL player, especially a quarterback taken after the 3rd round, you just shouldn't really expect that much out of that player. So I wouldn't call them a bust in any way, shape, or form. It's basically they either did nothing, like you'd kind of expect, maybe a backup type player, or they did something which, as I'll show you in a moment, is really rare. So I went through this list, like I said, all of these players over time. And then even if you just kind of focused in on the first rounders who were top 10 picks, I went through all of those and I analyzed that. What I came out with in the stats, this is what I want to walk you through. Total quarterbacks drafted since 1994, 357 quarterbacks. Of those, my opinion, but I would think this is pretty consistent, superstars, 16. 4.5% of those quarterbacks I would consider in the superstar quarterback tier. Star plus, think like better than star, a little bit, Pro Bowler, many years Pro Bowler, 3 of them, 0.8%. And stars, 10 of them at 2.8%. That's a total of 8.1% for that pool of 357 players. The remaining 328, the remaining 92% just didn't do anything, or they were a bust. Now, of those picks, this is worth noting, I pointed this out to people in the past. If you're like one of those people who thinks you can go out and speculate on quarterbacks who were taken later in NFL drafts, don't do it. Don't expect anything. You might get that short-term speculation bump when a Mason Rudolph type player gets a spot start and does something special. But outside of Brock Purdy, who I, by the way, had, in the TBD category, we'll see what happens with him because I think it's still early. Outside of Brock Purdy and outside of Peyton Manning and a handful of others, there's not a lot of promise around that. 13 of the 16 superstars from all, the last 30 years, 81% were taken in the first round. 9 of those, over 50%, 56%, were taken as top 10 picks in the first round. So that's where your money is made in terms of the performance of these quarterback athletes. Like I said, number of Tom Brady's taken after round 3, just 1, Tom Brady. That's it. Literally in the superstar category, only 1 of those players came after round 3. And of that star group, these 13 players, star plus, only 3 of them came after that point. Now, what if we talk about value? Because this is just sort of how they played in their careers. Not all of them have value in spite of playing really well. So in terms of long-term value, I said the ones that I think definitely sustain value over time since 1994, just 5. Just 5. And that's where that 99% number comes from that I referenced earlier. Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes. I would say those 5 are the 5 that definitely have value long-term. Probably, I would say another 4. Ben Roethlisberger, Eli Manning, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen. Somewhat. That means I don't know that they'll sustain where they've been, but they were good enough. They could be Hall of Fame caliber players. I know people are going to mock me for this one. I'm going to say Jared Goff. I think he's still got some life left in him. He might not. Maybe I should have put him in not sure, but this is my ranking. I can do what I want. Goff, Russell Wilson, Matthew Stafford, another homer pick, Matt Ryan, Phillip Rivers, and Donovan McNabb, who, by the way, He doesn't have tons of value, but he does have some value, and he obviously played well with the Eagles. And then everybody else, not sure, unlikely, and no. And the no's have it at 323 or 90.5%. So similar to this bucket, it's like you're looking at less than 10% of these players having any kind of value. And I can tell you the vast majority are going to go down over time from the early hype behind their prices. So what I want to do next, I'm going to look at some data. We've got these indexes in Market Movers, okay? We put together these rookie indexes, and what we did was we focused on field level silvers, and we focused on optic hollows. And the reason we did that is because Prism silvers over time, they're not the same every year. 2018, there's next to none of them. 2017, it was only Prism silvers, no rookie base cards. So Prism's been funky for football over the years. So we made these indexes, and it's comprised of something with a little bit more of a constant. And if I look at 2022, 21, 20, and 2019, each of these indexes, basically since these cards released, you can see all of them down 63%, 41%, 55%, 82% for the 2019 index. I can jump over and I'm going to look at the other ones we have. 2018 down 62%, 2016 down 86%. And the SCI 500, by the way, this collection of all these different cards across all markets, down 40%. So when you see these big numbers for quarterback indexes, those are down significantly more than the actual sports card market overall. The only index that's up, and it's up big since we started tracking it in early 2020, that was obviously before the big COVID boom, is 2017, and that's because of a guy named Patrick Mahomes. Now, like I said, over the last year, Mahomes cards are actually pretty much flat. Some are up, some are down. Overall, collectively, he is mostly flat. But you can see from these numbers, it's a pretty bad value proposition to get in early into these quarterbacks, who are the most notable players, and hope that they're going to retain value even within the first few years, let alone long term, when many of them just won't hold up among the greats of all time. I took some specific players who are notably busts in terms of where their value and expectation was down to the floor, and these are just their Topps Chrome Prism Optic base PSA 10s. The most expensive one right now is Baker Mayfield. He obviously just signed the big contract extension with the Buccaneers, $69. That card's up significantly, 170% in the last year. He's kind of had a resurgence. Kyler Murray's still in there. Here's Baker's Prism PSA 10. And you can kind of scroll down the list, but I mean, you start getting into these names: Sam Darnold, Trey Lance, Zach Wilson, Trubisky, Carson Wentz, RG3. The list goes on and on. I'll show you a few specific charts which really help hammer this home. Here's Sam Darnold, and this card down 37% since we started tracking it all the way back to 2019 in a PSA 10 format. Zach Wilson down 94%, $20 for a PSA 10. Trey Lance, $30, down 91%. Mac Jones, down 95%. In fact, if I blow this open, look at the high sales for these cards. $275, $330, $350, $510, and now you can have them all for $18 to $30. This is not unique to these four players. This is what I'm seeing across the board with all of these quarterbacks, and this is why I'm talking about it. It has me really concerned. It's not because I'm trying to bash or trying to be critical of football cards. I think some things need to change about this market overall for it to actually sustain long term. Now, if I look at notable sales, just high sales from these quarterbacks, 2021 and prior, I've got Trevor Lawrence, $264,000 for his NFL Shield, National Treasures NFL Shield auto card. Trevor Lawrence at $79,000, Justin Herbert $79,000, $78,000, $62,000. Big money going in, and it's all quarterbacks. It's all quarterbacks that this money is going into. So if I shift over and I look at the biggest losses, the cards that have gone down with at least two sales in the last 365 days, you've got Justin Herbert down $21,000. That's a 77% decrease within the same year on this card. Jalen Hurts down $20,000, Justin Herbert down again. A lot of Herbert. Jordan Love down big, Justin Fields down big, and the list goes on and on. You can see this Justin Fields, his RPA to 25 out of Flawless, down $8,000. That's an 89% decrease from where it was earlier. This is happening far more often than the opposite scenario. It seems like these cards come out, they have tons of money, and it makes me wonder, who are these high rollers who are buying these cards, and what are their hopes or plans or ambitions for them? Because generally speaking, they're just not going up in value, even with a guy like Patrick Mahomes. So what am I proposing? I think if people would actually slow their roll a little bit on quarterbacks, temper their zeal, be more realistic. It takes these guys most of the time a few years to even perform well. We saw Trevor Lawrence kind of break out in his second season, and he regressed last year. Now nobody knows what's going to happen with him. Jalen Hurts, he had a pretty good season still last year. Obviously a lot of rushing touchdowns, but the passing wasn't as good, and the Eagles completely, squandered their season away. If these players can't compete and they can't win championships, you're holding their cards, you're going to be in a really bad spot. If the card collecting community for football would look at players more holistically and say, from an investment perspective and from a collecting perspective, but you can't really tell people what to collect or who to collect, just from an investing perspective, and acknowledge that we should be looking at the greatest players at different positions and valuing them. That's what I think we should be doing. So I go back to the 2000s. So we're kind of removed from many, if not all of these players. And I looked at some of the notable running backs, receivers, and so on. So I'm on our sales history page. And what I did was I just put in the last 365 days and I sorted by price. So for example, I'm looking at this. You see Adrian Peterson of all of these running backs had the most expensive sale. And it wasn't even a rookie card. It was his 2012 Prism Black Finite 1/1. Notably, football had them. Basketball did not have the 1/1s from 2012. And this card sold for $9,000 on eBay back in November. And then you've got LaDainian Tomlinson PSA 10 refractor rookie card that sold for $4,000. You can kind of keep scrolling down the list. We're not talking about huge money. This is really interesting, and frankly, I think this card was a steal. This one was actually relisted on eBay. I think it went unpaid after a first payment, and this one looks to have sold. This is the 2007 Topps Chrome Adrian Peterson Gold Superfractor Rookie Auto. So this is just a really nice card. And this card sold for $3,000. Really interesting. I'd rather have that card than this 2012 Prism Black. That's just me. You can keep going down the list. Obviously, PMG Greens, incredibly iconic, incredibly sought after. Numbered to 10 or to 15 in football, and people don't even know where all of them are. It's not like you can get access to all of those. They literally never come up for sale. You just keep scrolling down the list. These aren't very big numbers for literally some of the greatest running backs of all time, Tomlinson, Peterson, and others, or even of a generation who carried many fantasy teams, have a lot of nostalgia. What about wide receivers? Well, unsurprisingly, we see Randy Moss topping this list. We also see Terrell Owens with his PMG green. Upwards of $11,000 for this 1/1 from the 90s. Very hard to come by 1/1s from the 90s. You got Marvin Harrison. We're looking at a set, these PMG greens, where certain people just collect those, and that bumps the value of these cards even independent and irrespective of the player or the athlete. This is a really cool card. This is a PSA 10 Stadium Club co-signers between, my opinion, the two greatest wide receivers of all time, Jerry Rice and Randy Moss. And they're on-card autos, both of them, PSA 10. Incredibly rare card, especially in a PSA 10 condition. That sold for under $8,000, whereas you have these Justin Fields cards selling for like $90K. Something about that just doesn't compute for me. And it's, I think, a lot to do with that sort of hot potato hype cycle versus people actually anticipating holding these cards or them retaining any value over time. Now, we can also shift. I know it's not sexy, it's not flashy, but the best offensive linemen I see in other sports, in baseball and even to some extent in basketball sometimes, people wanting to collect the greatest of all time, even at different positions. No, I don't ever expect an offensive lineman to command the type of value that a quarterback does. But when you're talking about truly, like if you counted down the top 10 from the last 30, 40 years, I would expect some of those guys too, and they really don't have any value outside of, like I said, the precious metal greens. You've got Trent Williams in a PSA 10, his gold, numbered to 50, $822 last summer from Topps Chrome. Orlando Pace Star Rubies, but like $700 for somebody who pretty much helps carry a team. Many times if it's not a quarterback, it's a left tackle that's being drafted first overall in the NFL draft. These guys are incredibly valuable. And I know there's not highlights and things, but they really don't retain any value. It would be nice to see those guys get some love from an investment community. And then finally, let's talk about defensive players. Some of my favorite athletes to watch. I've got Dwight Freeney, Strahan, Jason Taylor, Julius Peppards, all of the guys. I'll let you kind of zoom in and see this that I typed out in here. And at the top of the list, it is Ray Lewis, Ray Lewis, Ray Lewis, more Ray Lewis, and more Ray Lewis. In fact, let me see if I can find him and take him out of this list, and then we'll see who's left. So I've got this jersey, Darrelle Revis jersey at the top, and then $3,000 for a Troy Polamalu. You got an Ed Reed at $2,300. I mean, these are some of the best players truly ever at their positions. Players who literally helped win championships in many cases, the Steelers, the Ravens, some of these other defenses. And their cards really don't sell for very much. Many of the most iconic rookie cards. Look at this Troy Polamalu card. This is amazing. This is a gold X-Fractor with the gold ink auto on it. PSA 10, auto authentic. Really awesome card, under $2,000 for this player. So in my opinion, if I were looking at this from how do we sustain the value of football cards in general over time, and I were talking to people who really like to invest, who like to invest for the long term, it takes that sort of groupthink. There's some kind of silent consensus that happens within these ebbs and flows of data. But if people would start saying, I'm going to pay more for this incredibly awesome, probably one-of-a-kind Troy Polamalu card that is color match, and it's just amazing, versus going after the hot potato, high-end speculation market, I'm just really concerned that almost all of the money goes into quarterbacks. Nobody looks at other positions. It makes ripping wax really difficult for modern products. And then on top of it, very few, if any, of those players actually pan out. So I want to know, what do you think? Are football cards in trouble? Look, I fully understand the whole, why behind the current paradigm. I just don't necessarily agree with it. And the football card community as a whole, I think, needs to start acknowledging the value of other positions. And it also needs to start valuing retired athletes more, not just the most current ones with the most hype and absolutely nothing proven yet. Football cards, worth noting, really became popular over the last 2 to 3 years. For the first time ever did they catapult into the same conversation as basketball and baseball. And now football as a sport is globalizing more and more. It's by far the most popular sport in the United States. So I want to see football cards succeed long term. And I'm concerned that there's not anyone really pointing out that it's blown up too fast, too soon, and in a very imbalanced way. We saw what happened with Star Wars, Marvel, F1, flashes in the pan in terms of the high watermarks for sales. I hope football can stay healthy and sustainable over time and not burn out most of its collectors. But let me know what you think down in the comments. And while you're down there, do me a huge favor, like this video, make sure to subscribe, share it with a friend who likes football cards. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time, happy investing, keep on collecting, and make sure to have fun.